Sorry about that voice, everyone. I know it's quite jarring when it pops up. Um, okay, good. So we got a few more people arrived in the room. That's great. So I think what I'll do is I'll start by talking a little bit about myself. Who am I, how I came to do this webinar, and why I'm talking about anxiety and pain. So my name's Josh Fein-Brown. I'm an osteopath and a pain specialist. I trained as an osteopath 9 years ago now, and training in the osteopathy profession wasn't quite enough to sort of feed my hunger for knowledge. So I went and did another master's at UCL in pain management. And through that, I became really fascinated with what this thing that we suffer from, that we call pain, actually is. And the deeper that I looked into pain, particularly pain science and my own experiences of pain, the more that I saw that they were connected with emotional experiences. And they're really, when we look at the brain, there's not very much differentiation between emotional pain and physical pain. One of the big reasons why we suffer so much with physical pain is because it affects us emotionally. We feel very sad about that, or about losing function in that particular part of the body, or very scared about moving a part of the body that is in pain in case we may damage it further, or in case it screams at us in agony. And one of the main models that we have in the scientific literature at the moment for developing chronic pain, which is pain that goes on for a long, long time beyond the times that the tissues have been healing, is a fear avoidance model. And that is where we become very scared of injuring ourselves or scared of the pain experience that we've had. And so we start to avoid any movements or anything in our life that may give us that kind of pain experience. And that makes total sense, right? Like, it's awful to experience a lot of pain. If you learn that stairs are incredibly painful, you're going to avoid walking up and down stairs. Unfortunately, that kind of being scared of pain tends to lead to a reduction in activity, a reduction in muscle strength, and a perpetuation of this pain experience that people have been having. So we're going to dive a little bit more into that today. I run a private practice in Highbury and Islington, as well as doing a movement and breathing class here at Richmond Road Medical Centre once a week on Monday evenings, which is free to attend. So if any of you want to come along to that movement class, it's 6:15 on Mondays, and that's how I got in touch with the practice and how I am sitting here with you guys now doing this webinar. I'm also a lecturer in the university, so I lecture on 2 modules at the osteopathic university as well. So I've got my sort of hands in a lot of different jobs at the moment, and I love it. I love the diversity of that. So I think we should jump into the PowerPoint. We've got quite a few people who just entered the chat, which is lovely. So the objective of today is for you to come out of this lecture feeling grateful for your pain and for your anxiety. That's what I want to help with. And I'm also going to give you some very, very useful, very practical tools that I use in my clinic all the time to help you to regulate both pain and anxiety, not using the mind, but using the body. And I'll show you why and how that's so effective based upon the science behind our brains and how our brains work. If anybody has any questions, what I'll do is I'll leave a bit of time for coming to the questions at the end of the chat. And we will look at the chat box for any questions. So if you've got any questions that you're willing to ask or you really want to ask, then type them in the chat box and we'll have a look at that at the end of the presentation. So anxiety and pain are both increasing. We are becoming much more anxious as a population, especially after COVID. There's been a lot of fear around COVID, and that increased people's anxiety drastically. And unfortunately, the level of anxiety in the population, particularly in young people and particularly in women, has gone up since 2018. And the prevalence of pain is also increasing, particularly of chronic pain. We are a population that is the most anxious and in the most pain that has been recorded in history, unfortunately. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea why I think that might be. But first, let's look at a bit of neuroscience. So I'm going to explain to you how we can use the understanding of broccoli to understand the brain. So we've got to start with the broccoli in order to do this. Now, in this picture, what you can see is everything the broccoli needs in order to survive. The broccoli needs soil, the broccoli needs rain, and it needs water, which enter the broccoli's leaves and the trunk via the roots, travels in this upward direction, bottom up. The broccoli also needs sunshine, which hit the leaves and combine with carbon dioxide to create sugars and nutrients that the broccoli then uses to build itself and transports that back down to the roots. So there's this bi-directional communication going on, sunlight coming down, top down, water coming bottom up. And we have the same bi-directional communication in our brains. Now, when we have something in our environment that we perceive as threatening, let's say, for example, it's a spider or a work deadline that's coming up, or potentially somebody, your ex just walked into a pub who you had a terrible relationship with. And suddenly these environmental stimuli that you're seeing and feeling signal to you that this is a threatening situation. Now, this information comes in from the eyes or in from your senses and travels up to the basal ganglia, which are a part of our brains that sits at the base of our skull. And this basic part of our brain is present in all mammals, all reptiles, and it coordinates our basic bodily functions, like heart rate, like breathing, like temperature, and we need it in order to survive. That's why if you look in movies, let's say a mafia movie, and they put a gun in the mouth and they point it straight back, it's guaranteed to kill somebody because you hit this area of the brain at the base of the skull, which coordinates all of the rest of the survival functions. And this is where stress activates. So stress is a coordinator of these primary functions, which is the reason why when you're stressed out, you get hot, your heart rate increases, your breathing rate changes, etc. So when you see something in your environment that's stressful, the signal comes in from the body senses and hits these stress areas of your brain, but it doesn't stop there. The brain has to make sense of these experiences. And so it tends to then send the information up to the cortex, which is the newer part of our brains, particularly well developed in people, and seems to be responsible for our thinking, our internal narrative, our internal images, and all of the things that go on inside of our heads. And when you see something that's threatening, let's say your ex has just walked into the pub, what do? You start to think about potential ways you're going to deal with that situation, right? You start to attempt to find a solution to the problem that is perceived as threatening. And your mind gets really, really busy predicting how it's going to act in the future, trying to get you to find a way in which to tackle this situation in a way that you're not going to get into an awkward conversation with this guy. Do you leave? Do you stay around? What do you do? So the stress is sensed by the body, feeds the stress response system first, and then attempts to be explained by the thoughts, by the cognitions in the brain. And then let's say you see a spider, you see the spider is in between you and the door, and you don't see any way of you getting past that spider without encountering it, and you are terrified of those spiders. You're thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And that thought process then sends a signal back down to this stress center and amplifies that whole process. It really is threatening, this thing that you're sensing. You've made sense of it, and this sense you're making is that it's terrible, and I need to get more stressed out about this to attempt to escape and deal with this situation. So these anxious thoughts then start to power up the stress response, heart rate increases more, breathing rate starts sweating. And That then communicates back down to the body that it needs to do something to react to this, to protect you, tension, and all the other responses I've just mentioned. Now, what is the end of this cycle, right? The body then transmits the information of tension and stress and threat back to the brain, and it amplifies the whole situation further. And yes, the end result is a panic attack. Because this whole system has gone into overdrive. The thoughts are feeding the stress is feeding the thoughts, and vice versa. And it gets to the point where we can't even breathe. So, what does stress actually do? Now, we've spoken about this already a little bit, but stress is perfectly designed to create action. And I'm going to explain to you why. So we need to talk a little bit about survival, right? Because ultimately, our stress response is connected directly to our survival. That's why all species with nervous systems have some kind of stress response, because it's trying to coordinate action to be able to help you to survive. Maybe that's running away from the thing that you feel threatened by. Maybe it's fighting it, like the spider taking off your shoe and getting ready to slap that thing. Or maybe it's just fainting. This is an overwhelming situation and you need to completely pass out and shut down. It's too much. So the survival of the species depends on 5 different tasks. And these common tasks are shared by all organisms that live. And these are, we need to maintain our bodies, our body integrity. We need to drink, balance fluids and electrolytes. We need to eat. So we need to incorporate nutrients. We need to reproduce, and we need to detect danger. So detection of danger is done by the senses, and maintenance of the physical body is where we start to connect pain and fear. And that's because pain, the whole reason we have pain is because it is trying to signal to us that we need to protect the physical state of our bodies. Pain is so often associated with damage. And pain is a product of our brains. Now, you may think, well, but if I cut my hand, it hurts in my hand. So therefore the pain is in the hand, right? And this is a very, very common misconception with pain. So we're going to use 2 examples. First example is of phantom limb pain. So it's a phenomenon that's very, very strange, but one that's quite well known. And that is when amputees, they have a horrendous injury or maybe a terrible infection, and they have a whole part of their body severed, cut off. And it's a very, very common experience. I think between 30 and 60% of amputees experience pain in the limb that no longer exists. So let's say I've had my arm amputated, and what I'm describing to the doctors when I'm going is that my hand that no longer is there is gripping into my palm. It's squeezing so hard that the nails are starting to cut through the palm and the skin, and they can't unclench it. This is a really common experience for phantom limb pain that's so specific. But there's no hand to be squeezing. But they experience real pain. This is not a made-up experience. This is real pain. And what this tells us is that pain is an output of the brain. So our brains have learned how and built a representation of the hand throughout our life. So there's like a little mini hand that lives in your brain. And when the nerves are activated around that little hand that lives in your brain, then you feel sensations as if the hand was still there, like a memory of the hand. Very, very similar to the way if I ask you right now to imagine an apple. So really try and close your eyes and imagine an apple in as much detail as you possibly can. What do you see and what do you feel? I'm guessing, but I expect that imagined apple in your mind is not just an image. It also starts to cause you to salivate a little bit, if you like apples. It comes with the smell of apples. It comes with the texture, the crunch. It comes with the taste. So what you have done is you have built an internal representation of an apple. Throughout all your experiences with apples in your life, you have built an apple into your mind, right? Now we do the very same thing with our limbs. We build them into our memories, into our minds. And so we can experience an apple, we can taste it, we can smell it without it even being there, just like we can experience pain in a hand without the hand ever being there. It's the same mechanism. Now, fundamentally, fear is trying to protect us against death. The end result of all fear is death. And one of the things that's definitely going to kill you is damage to your body. If the body is damaged too much, then you will die. So pain, because pain means that your body is damaged, is a perfect object to be feared. Because fear is trying to protect you against death, and pain is representing death, right? Or the potential of death if it carries on and gets too severe, right? So we so often fear pain. And also because it's terribly unpleasant, right? It's not just that it might kill you, but it also hurts like hell. It causes us to suffer. And we often fear the things that we suffer. Now, when we become scared or when we are in pain, we tend to activate this stress response. The body tends to activate the stress response in order to get us to try and do something about this. Now, I'm going to show you a little video. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's a video that has impacted me a lot, and I hope it has the same impact on you. And I want you to think about how goddamn useful stress can be in this circumstance, okay? And this is how we think that human beings, before we had modern culture, used to hunt. It's called the persistence hunt. So if everybody can let me know in the chat box if you can hear this okay.
In science, the hand sign indicates that one of them has found the track of a group of kudu. These are the San people of the Kalahari Desert, the last tribe on Earth to use what some believe is the most ancient hunting technique of all, the persistence hunt. They run down their prey. Start to feel the rhythm of the animal's movements from the spacing of the tracks. The group is not moving fast. The animals have taken fright. They will concentrate on the bull. He will be carrying a heavy set of horns and therefore will tire more quickly. To do that, they must separate him from the herd so that his tracks won't be confused by those of others. The sun is directly overhead, and the men sense a change in the kudu's pace. Slowing. After hours, they've entered an almost trance-like state of concentration. At times, it's impossible to see any sign of the kudu's tracks, and the hunters must imagine the path it will have taken. Heat is hard on the hunters, but they're now close enough for the next stage of the hunt, the chase. This is the signal for it to begin. But only one man will undertake it. Koroe, the runner. He must be relentless. It's now a test of endurance. Who will collapse first, the man or the animal? This was how men hunted before they had weapons, when a hunter had nothing more than his own physical endurance with which to gain his prize. Running on 2 feet is more efficient over long distances than running on 4. A man sweats glands all over his body and so cools himself. A kudu sweats much less and has to find shade if it's to cool down. The man has hands with which to carry water, so during the chase he can replenish the liquid he loses as sweat. Hours pass and Karoe is getting closer. But then the kudu runs into thick cover. Tracks have disappeared. Karoe tries to put himself into the mind of the kudu and himself reenacts the moment when it heard him approaching as it tried to rest in the shade. He deduces the direction in which it must have fled. It's close by. The chase has lasted 8 hours. Hunter and hunted are both at the end of their strength. Neither can go on much longer. Then the kudu collapses from sheer exhaustion. It's close to death. Karoe's spear throw now is scarcely more than a symbolic gesture. The hunter pays tribute to his quarry's courage and strength with ceremonial gestures that ensure that its spirit returns to the desert sands from which it came. While it was alive, he lived and breathed with it and felt its every movement in his own body. And at the moment of its death, he shared its pain. He rubs its saliva into his own legs to relieve the agony of his burning muscles. And he gives thanks for the life he has taken so that he may sustain the lives of his family waiting for him back in their settlement.
Okay. So this is, first of all, an entirely different relationship with the food that we eat, right? But the symptoms of stress that we were talking about previously, the heart rate increases, the blood pumping more to the muscles, the tension in the muscles, the increase in breathing rate, sweating, thinking, predicting into the future, planning. They're all present within that hunting video. That hunter, Koroe, was imagining where that kudu had gone in the bush. He was predicting into the future. His heart rate was up, he was sweating, he was using his stress response, and without it, there is no way in which he would have been able to achieve what he achieved. So our stress response is designed for action. It is perfectly designed for us to be moving in our natural environment. Now, one of the big problems that we have today is that we don't move in our natural environments. Most of us don't live close to nature. We live in these insulated boxes. And the kinds of stresses that we have in our lives and the ways in which we deal with those stresses are completely different to how we've evolved to be able to deal with these things. But those primal responses that the body is attempting to help us to achieve action, helping us to try and get those stresses resolved, is exactly the same as it was. Our bodies are exactly the same as they have been. Evolution hasn't progressed enough, it hasn't caught up with cultural evolution. So we are still living in the same bodies effectively as Koroe is. Same stress responses. Now, the beginning of the culture in which we live started around 40,000 years ago. And something amazing happened in which man began to, or human beings, rather than just man, I think is better, but they started to paint on caves. They started to create abstract art. And this art that they created represents a process of forming a world inside your imagination that is not directly connected with the world that is out there, the physical world. And then taking that imaginary world, imagining the animals, and then forming representations, symbols of them by drawing them in simplistic forms on the cave walls. And this is a drastic shift. We're the only species that we know about that is capable of forming very, very detailed imaginary worlds in our minds. And we live most of the time in modern day society in these imaginary worlds. We're no longer so grounded within the physical world. We don't have to use our senses in the same way. We don't have to be so responsive and sensitive to our environment. We don't have to run for 8 hours to eat a meal. And that process of becoming more abstract as a species started in those cave paintings 40,000 years ago. Then if we fast forward in time to the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, we began to settle. We began to farm and plant crops and then stay in the same place, watch those crops grow. And we started to say, hey, this crop is mine. It's not yours. This piece of land is mine. Land ownership became a phenomenon. We were no longer nomadic. And with land ownership came the development of towns, the development of cities. Population increased drastically because when you farm land, you can produce way more food than if you're just letting it grow and you're a nomadic species. So population increased, we became more sick, diets got worse up until modern day, really. The next dramatic shift came with the Industrial Revolution, when we started to move away from mainly manual-based jobs, where you were using your body day in, day out, to the movements being very, very repetitive on production lines. And we started to be able to control nature massively. Luckily, with the Industrial Revolution came modern medicine, which is a marvel, and it's absolutely fantastic, but our lives changed drastically again. Then modern computers came around in the 1930s. The internet came around in the 1990s. And just think how much impact that's had on how we live our lives today. How we are living in a completely different situation to how we have evolved to live, to Koroe the hunter. And what we do with our anxiety, with our stress these days, is that we label it as a terrible thing, that it's a killer. It's something that we need to get rid of. It's something that we need to stop experiencing because it's bad for us. And anxiety, we wish we didn't experience these things. And part of the reason why they become so negative is because we don't use them for what they're designed for anymore. We sit there and we're stressed and we're working in a sedentary position all day, and the stress is largely remained without being processed through movement. Our social environments are also much more complex than they used to be, and we have hierarchical systems that we often work within, which is very stressful as well. We have less control over our environments too. And all of these things compound to make anxiety and stress such a big problem as it is today. So, fear is useful for survival. We generally freeze, run away, fight, or faint when we're in the face of something that we feel is threatening. And particularly with pain, we tend to freeze or try and avoid the things that are painful. And freezing, as a response, is muscle tension. We tend to really tense up when we're freezing. And we've spoken about the relationship between these two. Okay, so I'm going to open up for 5 minutes of questioning before we do a practical exercise to help to move stress through our bodies. So if anybody wants to turn on their microphone, or actually, let me have a look at the chat here, see if anyone's got any questions. The sound is very patchy for some people. I hope that resolved. Some people said it did. Okay, anybody have any questions for me so far? So how do you balance exercise with chronic pain? That is a great question. Thank you very much for asking. So exercise therapy is one of the most effective therapies for chronic pain, but there's a catch. When you exercise, if you've got chronic pain, it tends to hurt. And so there's a big conundrum which goes, okay, we need to exercise if we've got chronic pain, but it's really painful to do so. So it seems to make my pain worse when I do. Now, I think that the solution to that problem is to be able to regulate, first of all, your own body if you're in pain. And by regulating your body, what I mean is really being able to regulate the amount of tension that you're holding in your body. Because often if you've got chronic pain, you've also got chronic tension. And then exercising in a way that you're able to move in a way that feels pleasant. That's always the starting point that I do with people who have chronic pain. And you have to experiment a lot with movement in order to find a movement that feels good in the body. And you also have to look for those movements that feel good, not just look for pain. So it may be that you're moving a part of the body that is completely separate from the part that's actually in pain, but you're looking for that kind of feeling like, oh, you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, that's a really good stretch, actually. That's really pleasant. I like that a lot. And when you're experiencing pleasure in movement, because movement can be really pleasant to do, you're activating the brain chemistry that is a painkiller. Pleasure is a painkiller in our brain. The reason why we feel pleasure is because we're releasing chemicals in our brain, and those same chemicals are opiates, and also same chemicals that we use with cannabis as well. But the opiates are effectively our own personal supply of morphine. So when you find pleasure in movement, you release chemicals that reduce pain, and it's essential to find pleasure in movement if you want to move with chronic pain. So I hope that answers your question. Anybody else quickly before we move to some exercises?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Yeah, fire away.
So why actually there is chronic pain?
Why?
Why the pain becomes chronic? Why is it lingering for months or years?
That is a very big question.
Asking because like I probably have one, that's why I would like to know the answer.
Yes. So chronic pain seems to function like a memory. And we can learn pain, unfortunately. Now, there's very many different kinds of pain, and the chronic pain I'm talking about is the kind of pain that no longer has tissue damage associated with it. The tissues are no longer diseased. Sometimes people can have chronic pain because they have really bad arthritis, and every time they move, their joints are actually signaling to the brain that there is some damage there. That's one example. But other people can experience chronic pain after an injury that the injury is healed and the joint is now working fine. And that kind of chronic pain tends to be more like a memory. It's you haven't, or the person hasn't entered a process of relearning how that joint can function again and approaching that pain with your awareness and finding something that is able to resolve it. But it's a very complex issue.
But there is a way to resolve it, or is there a way to lower it?
Definitely. There is a way out, 100%. And there's very good evidence to say that we can treat it. And I've treated many instances of chronic pain, and people have got a lot better. So it's not like this is what you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life at all. And some of the exercises we'll go through now are going to be very helpful for you if you've got chronic pain.
Good news.
Okay, so back to the broccoli. Now, this broccoli is a little bit different. It's got sparkles, and what we're seeing here is a situation where we can use the body to reduce the amount of stress in the brain. So we can use the body to signal safety to the brain, not just signaling threat. And when we signal safety to the brain, then the brain reduces the stress response and then feeds up to the thoughts, and the thoughts no longer need to explain all of this threatening information that's coming from the lower centers. So the thoughts tend to change, but we can also use the thoughts in conjunction with the body to be able to reduce the amount of stress. This is a bi-directional relationship, remember. So in the exercises we're going to do now, we're going to use the body and the mind together in order to help to reduce the amount of stress and to help signal to the body safety. Because if we're signaling safety, then there's nothing that we need to be stressed about, and our muscles can relax and our whole system changes. And actually, we can change the direction of thoughts too. So how do we do this? Well, it's a 5-part process. And there is more parts to this, but we're just going to go through 5 of these today. So the first part of this exercise, I want everybody to sit and close their eyes, please. And as you're sitting and closing your eyes, now some of you will be able to do this easier than others, so don't worry if it's hard for you, just listen to the process. But I want you to get stressed out. So what we're going to do is get you to imagine a situation that happened in your life recently that really stressed you out. Maybe a work deadline. Try not to choose something that was too traumatic, please, but something that was difficult. Maybe an argument, maybe missing a train, maybe missing a plane, maybe becoming very late for work and it wasn't your fault and somebody was going to get angry at you, etc. And in that situation, really try and bring yourself back there. Try and remember how you felt. Try and remember that your mind raced, thinking very fast. Perhaps your shoulders became tense. Perhaps your breathing changed, became faster or stopped. Perhaps your posture changed as well. You started to close in the chest and start to protect yourself a little more. Heart rate increased. Started sweating. So all of these are the symptoms of stress. All of these are the stress response becoming active. Now we're going to do something quite different. And I want you to take yourself through all of those changes physically, and I'll guide you through it. And say thank you to the body for giving you all of these responses. And try to mean it, recognizing that the body is just doing its very, very best to help you to deal with this stressful situation. See if you can find in yourself some gratitude for the body working so hard to try and help you and to try and protect you. So let's begin with the muscle tension. Thank you, tension in my shoulders, in my jaw, in my belly, in my legs. Thank you, tension, for trying to protect me and to help me through this stressful situation. And you can say this out loud or in your mind, it doesn't matter. Now let's move to the lungs. Thank you, breath, for stopping or for speeding up to help to protect me and bring more oxygen into my lungs. More oxygen allows me to move better. Thank you so much, lungs. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, mind, for racing, for helping me to get through this stressful event, for helping me to plan and to make sure that I anticipate any potential threats in the future. Thank you very much, mind, for racing. Thank you, heart, for beating faster, pumping more blood to my muscles, pumping more blood to my brain, so I can move through this thing I'm stressed about and think through it much more effectively. Thank you very much, digestion, for shutting down, for stopping all of your functions so I can deal with this stress better. Now, what was that like to do? Is that something that you've done before? Is that normally the relationship that you have with stress or anxiety? The same thing can be done with pain. We can thank pain for attempting to protect us, from attempting to signal to us that something is potentially damaged and needs to be tended to, needs to be healed. And what this does is it changes our relationship with the physical aspect of the pain or the anxiety that we're experiencing. And that transformation to gratitude is an extremely potent and powerful way to relate to these usually quite negative experiences. And the wonderful thing about love, the wonderful thing about gratitude is that they can hold fear and pain and anger like you would hold a little child and say, hey, listen, it's okay. I'm here. But the problem with fear and the problem with pain and the problem with anger is that when you're in it, it's very, very difficult to love anything. They don't include other emotions. They exclude them. They push them away. Fear tends to avoid them. Anger tends to attack them. So gratitude and love are more powerful in that they don't get rid of these things, but they change the relationship to them. So once gratitude has been laid as the foundation, then we can begin the breath. And the kind of breath that is so useful for helping to regulate stress is the breath that uses our diaphragm and descends into the belly. So I'd like everybody to place their hands on their belly right now, one hand on your chest, so that you can feel these two areas. And the first movement is to push the belly out. So I want you to, without breathing, just try and push your belly out and suck it in. Get used to that feeling of pushing out and sucking in the belly. Next, what we're going to do is, sorry, pushing my belly in and out made me move some stuff around in my digestion. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring air into the belly. And as you breathe in, you want the belly to come out, inflating it like a balloon. Don't limit the breath to the belly. You can raise it up to the chest as well, but we want to make sure that some of the breath enters this space down here. So let's practice that 5 times, breathing into the belly, inflating the belly with the in-breath, And as you breathe out, try to relax the body. Inflating the belly with the in-breath. Breathing out and trying to relax the body. Three more times. Breathing in. Inflating the belly. Breathing out, relaxing. Breathing in, inflating the belly. Breathing out, relaxing. Last one. Breathing in, inflating the belly. And slow the out breath now. Really extend the length of the out breath. Give yourself more time for the relaxation. Now, if we look at the research, the perfect ratio between the in-breath and the out-breath for relaxation is 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. So that you're extending that out-breath, giving your body a chance to calm down. And there's a natural reflex that happens whenever we breathe out, that is that it lowers our heart rate, starts to calm us down. When we breathe in, it increases our heart rate ever so slightly. So if overall you're spending more time breathing out, overall your heart rate is going to reduce. Now the caveat with this is that if anxiety is extreme, sometimes it's overwhelming and it's too difficult to calm that down. The more you practice this breathing and the more you practice the relaxation, the more you'll gain the skill of regulating your own heart rate and the easier it will become to regulate your stress response too. So I highly recommend practicing this on the train, wherever you've got a moment, placing a hand on the belly, hand on the chest, 4 in and 6 out. So now we need to come to the posture. Now, if we are scared, if we are in pain, what we tend to do is to tense, bringing our shoulders forwards and upwards, bringing our belly into tension, and this is a perfect position to protect us. So I'm exaggerating, obviously, but this tends to be a very defended, very protected position. Why? Because we're covering the most vulnerable places in our body, our throat and our belly. If you ask any boxer or any fighter what's the best defended position, they say protect your jaw, protect your neck. It's because if they get hit in the jaw or they get hit in the neck, that's it, you're knocked out very easily. So we tend to protect these areas by raising the shoulders, by tucking in the chin, by bringing the head forwards, and by creating tension to protect against force. And because pain is a threatening thing, fear is a response to threat, this is what we tend to do. Now, the problem is that when we enter social situations, if this is our particular posture that we have, we make judgments about other people in less than half a second. And we make judgments about people based on 2 things, their facial expression and their posture. So if you're walking into a social situation and you're anxious and you're expressing fear, the other person is going, well, why are they defending against me? Why are they in a position where they feel like they're under threat? And we mirror each other. If you see anybody who's on a date in a bar and the date is going well, they'll be crossing their legs in the same way. They'll be mirroring each other, I guarantee it. So when the other person starts mirroring you, they start to adopt the same kind of position. And this then changes their physiology and is associated with threat, so they start feeling under threat as well. So posture is not just nice for one's own body and good for pain, but it's also a social phenomenon. So the second thing that we need to adjust if we're feeling anxious or scared is to bring ourselves into a stance where we are relaxed, upright, and exposing these vulnerable places to the world. Breathing in deeply from the belly, lifting the chest ever so slightly, and relaxing into the body in a more upright, open position. And then put a smile on your face. We smiled, and whenever we smile, it activates the same brain areas that make us happy, because our association throughout our whole life is when we're smiling genuinely, we tend to feel good. And so we can reverse engineer it that way. So the posture is the second one we need to do. Opening the posture, exposing the vulnerable places, and smiling. Smiling at our anxiety. Now, for pain, we need to move. And for fear, it may be good to start a boxing class or to run if you really want to move through your fear. Both of those things are extremely useful. Now, the way in which we want to move with pain experiences in a way that feels very, very pleasurable. So I want everybody to stand up now. And when you stand up, we're going to go through two different kinds of stretching. And this is something that I see in my clinic all the time. And I spend my life teaching people how to stretch properly because the whole world has taught you how to do it wrong. So let's go into like a side bending stretch. And if your back is painful, find another stretch that you can do that you get a stretch. But I'm just going to demonstrate this one. So bend over to the side, really reach. Just like in a yoga class, you might say, go deeper into the stretch or find a nice deep stretch. And it's likely what you're doing now is you're experiencing a stretch that's about 7 or 8 in intensity out of 10. You're kind of not breathing that much either. And you're wondering when this stretch is going to end because it's quite unpleasant, but you feel like it's probably good for you. Come back out. Okay. So this is how most of us stretch. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the stretch on the other side of the body. But this time, what I'd like you to do is focus on the breath. So you're breathing evenly in and out throughout the movement. And only go to the point of like 3 or 4 out of 10. So stay at a mild stretch that doesn't really feel like it's doing that much. But use the deep breath and then the out breath to try and relax into the stretch. So you're trying to concentrate on turning off and lengthening the muscles that are actually stretching. Breathing into them. And what you may notice if you're doing this well is that you gradually drop further into the movement. You slowly, by using the breath, extend the length of the muscles, but the stretch doesn't get very much more intense. You start to lengthen without experiencing that reactive tension or any more discomfort coming out. Now, what you've done is you've started to listen to your body. You've started to respond to your body when it's saying, hey, thank you very much. This is exactly what I wanted. This feels great. As opposed to listening to no pain, no gain. And no pain, no gain will create tension and it will create much more, you'll be very inefficient in your stretches and you won't learn how to regulate your body. But moving and stretching in a way that just feels really pleasant and you're breathing deeply during it, your body is effectively saying thank you. Because the message that the body says when it says thank you is a pleasurable feeling. That's the way in which your body communicates it. So when you're moving, look for pleasure in movement. Let's do that for the other side. Breathing gently, just taking it easy with the stretch. Concentrating on relaxing into the movement. Let's go into a forward bend for those who can at the moment. Looking down and just slowly dropping down towards the floor. Breathing all the way. And don't push it. And bend your knees at the end of the movement. Don't try and hold them straight. Look for a pleasant way to stretch. And as you gradually roll back up, just notice how it felt. Now we have this internal compass. We all have this inbuilt compass. And that is from discomfort to comfort, from pain to pleasure. And if you're moving in a way that creates a pleasurable sensation, especially in the face of pain, what you'll be doing is you'll be using the internal orientation that we have evolved over millions and millions of years. You will be listening to the messages that the body is trying to tell you. Rather than trying to think through what's best for you, try and feel through what's best and trust that your body knows what it needs. And it will give you what it needs, signaling that to you with a really pleasant sensation. So hopefully you are understanding a little bit more anxiety from a body-based perspective. Hopefully you understand the value of anxiety for survival and the difference between the way in which we are living today versus how we have evolved to live. Hopefully you understand a little bit about how pain is an output from the brain and how we need to move into pain with finding pleasure and listening deeply. And hopefully you understand also how to breathe to be able to calm your whole system down and to regulate yourself a little bit better. So we've got 5 minutes left for questions, and then I'm going to have to go. Yes. Just a little caveat at the end while you type your questions or ask them. This is a link to my website, and at the moment I've got an offer on, so if anybody needs a session to help with pain or dysfunction in the body, then you can book online there. My clinic's in Highbury, Islington, we're very close to the station. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, then Fein Health, F-E-I-N Health, that's my little handle there, and you can get in contact with me there too. So please feel free to give me a follow. And if you've got any questions, you can message me on Instagram, or my contact details are on the website as well if you don't get your chance to ask your questions here now. I do work for Richmond Road. Well, I volunteer for them on a Monday evening, and I teach a movement and breathing class. So if you want to come and join that on a weekly basis, come in on Monday evening at 6:15. And YouTube channels, in terms of YouTube channels, who do I recommend? There's a guy called Gabor Mate. Some of you may have heard of him already. I highly recommend his stuff. He's got a few videos on there. I've also got a channel, and you can find me by searching my name. And I've got more videos, meditations that go through stress and the meditations that we went through today too. There's also some other lectures on there in case you're interested. So Charlotte's asked what the benefit is of holding the breath. There are many benefits to holding the breath. Buteyko breathing is a type of breathing developed by a Russian scientist who worked with the army. And when you increase your tolerance for holding the breath, particularly with the lungs empty, so you breathe out and hold it, you increase your blood's cells, those red blood cells' capacity for holding on to oxygen. Because they detect that they're not able to, they don't have as much oxygen, your body starts to go, okay, oh my God, we need to be more efficient at getting oxygen because we haven't got very much of it. And so you start to then optimize your ability to hold on to oxygen, which benefits all your tissues. So breath holding, it's really great. Thanks for the feedback, guys. Thanks for joining, everybody. So one final question. Do I have advice on pain medication? How do I see pharmacology when interacting with other interventions to deal with pain? That's a great question. Pain medication for chronic pain, or pain that has persisted for a long period of time, most of the research says that it's pretty ineffective unless you have a short-term pain that you're trying to get rid of. And opiates in the long run, they're very addictive, and they're also terrible for pain. Actually, if you have opiates for a long time, you end up increasing your sensitivity to pain over time rather than decreasing it. Ongoing pain medications, particularly opioids for chronic pain, are not a good idea. Gabapentin and pregabalin may be a good idea for ongoing pain. There's some research to say that that is useful for chronic pain. For acute pain, so you've just bashed your foot or you've had an injury and you need to get rid of acute pain, paracetamol is your best friend. Ibuprofen can actually delay the healing process because it suppresses the inflammatory response, which is attempting to heal us. But ultimately, do what works. If it's working for you and the pain medication is enabling you to live your life in a way that you want to be living it, then use it. But don't use it in isolation. Use it in order to move, use it in order to help yourself with other things, because in isolation, it's not an effective treatment. So hopefully that answers your question. Great. Okay, well, we don't have any time for any more questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Hopefully you can give me a follow and be in touch if you've got any other questions. But yeah, it's great to speak to you all, and I'll upload the recording to my YouTube as well, so you can see it there. All right, then. I hope you have a lovely evening. Take care. Speak to you again soon.